Okay, with us to take a closer look at how potentially disruptive such tariffs could really be to the United States auto sector is Karl Brauer, executive analyst at iSeeCars.com. Karl, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Hey, great being on with you, Sean.
Okay, so let's get right to it. How could these increased costs from tariffs affect not just car prices, but employment, economic stability in the North American auto facilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big problem right now, or the big word right now, is uncertainty, right? That's where automakers and a lot of the industry is at. They just don't know what's going to happen, and that's never good. They're just not sure. I think it's pretty confident that Trump doesn't really want to impose massive tariffs unless he has to, but he certainly likes to use those and the threat of them as a negotiation tactic. And if he can get what he thinks is a fair deal for U.S. automakers and the U.S. economy in working with these foreign countries, then there won't be tariffs, or there'll be relatively minor ones. But if he feels like he's not getting what he needs without using tariffs, then those could come into play and, of course, drive up the cost of vehicles and potentially hurt employment.
Yeah, let alone all the promises that he made to his really fanatic followers here in the U.S. during the election season. So moving on, how might tariffs hinder U.S. automakers' competitiveness? Because especially when it comes to EVs, because if you go to other countries, everybody's talking about EVs. And here, Donald Trump's talking about drill, baby, drill. And a lot of people simply don't want to get rid of their traditional gas-burning vehicles.
That's exactly right, and we're looking at about a 10% market share, which is good. That shows still growth in EV demand and sales here, but not the level of growth everyone was predicting and requiring according to government regulations and the expectation that sales would ramp up to meet the CO2 and emission standards that have been imposed. And I think, Trump's attitude is, if you have both internal combustion and electric as an option, and you let the market decide versus trying to force the transition, especially if vehicles are expensive and they don't offer a lot of profit for their automakers, that's a better way to go. So that's what he wants to do. Now, like you're right, though, the rest of the country or the rest of the planet is very much moving with EVs, but we're hearing pushback too in Europe. I hear that there's sales struggling there to move. And I think, again, we need the cost of EVs everywhere to be more in line with what consumers are willing to pay, while still leaving some profit left for the brands that are making them.
Yeah, Karl, that really leads to my next question. No surprise that people who do want to jump on the bandwagon and buy an EV, they're doing it, and they're getting a significant tax break. But Trump says that he's going to eliminate the Biden-era subsidies on EVs. So, I mean, just doing the math, it seems like this could only hurt EV development future in the U.S., putting the United States potentially behind other nations.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the report said, that the $7,500 tax credit is an absolute factor in the sales of EVs, along with a lot of creative like lease rates and other incentives that have been going on. And I think that's, again, it speaks to the level of organic demand versus kind of trying to create demand through these incentives. And what you have to ask yourself is, should the U.S. allow the market to be more in control of that transition, or should they try to make it happen quicker, which a lot of the rest of the markets on the planet are doing?
Right.
And, I don't know if there's a real clear answer to that, other than the fact that, we want to see CO2 and emissions cut. But I always feel like the best cars that you can sell to do that, the best cars you can produce to do that, are the ones you can sell. I'm a big fan of hybrids and even plug-in hybrids, which can act like an EV for a certain amount of distance, right?
Right.
So if you could sell a lot more plug-in hybrids than pure EVs, both because they're less expensive and they don't include range anxiety, I think your net is that you still end up with a big reduction in CO2 production, but you're getting consumers on board much more willingly at a lower price.
I think that's a great point, Karl. Now, Beijing says it is going to restrict exports of some key minerals that are needed to move forward in tech manufacturing here in the United States. And that is in response to the U.S. curbs on exports of to China of advanced chips. So talk about these moves, how it's going to affect auto production in both nations, given the amount of software that's in cars nowadays.
It's really fascinating to watch, these two nations that need each other, and but whether it's raw materials or the level of advancement on the chips, and then fighting over who gets what, and this tit for tat as you're describing. And what we all know is that ultimately what that's going to do is going to further drive up prices, because both countries are going to have to find other sources for these or develop their own, and that's going to take time and money. But it's probably also going to encourage more self-sufficiency long term. That both countries are going to realize we don't want to be in this position. And what's going to really be interesting is whether it's 3, 5, 7 years from now, do you end up in a position where China's got the ability to produce these chips, whether we want them to or not, or we've got the ability to get those raw materials, whether China wants us to have them or not. You'll lose less influence over the other countries' capabilities, but it's going to cost you more in the short term and make it harder to, again, produce these vehicles at a profitable level.